All right. Well, a bit earlier than I thought, but I think I'm going to do a little bit of a rant about the truth in Christianity. And necessarily, such a rant would have to encompass the Protestant fake Christian stuff. So it's probably going to piss everybody off. But, I've had a pretty decent go at the so-called Catholics. Video number 1 and 2 were about that. And I've spoken about that since. And in fact, I'm busy trying to make a little documentary about that, about the real Catholic Church and what's left of it. So, I made sure that I had a nice, good, hard go at supposedly my own guys first. They're not really my guys because the Catholic Church, what people think is the Catholic Church, isn't. All the clerics in it are invalid. The Pope is a fake Pope. I haven't had a real Pope since 1958, and so on and so forth. If you care about the details of that, go look at the other videos. But I wanted to address something else, a bit more general, which is, I've said before that there are people that I consider Christians who are not necessarily Catholic. But these are generally outliers. Now, the thing about Protestantism that is so pernicious is that, first of all, it's an obvious lie. Everything related to Protestantism is a lie. And it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. It's not hard. I'm actually going to sketch it out because here you go. There's your plain situation. Now, I'm going to draw on here the starting point. So there you go. That little cross is your starting point of truth. Now, as you travel along, you'll find that for 1,000 years, there's only one truth. Yeah. Then in roughly the year 1054, you get a bit of a split. I dropped a bit there. There we go. So after 1054, you get a bit of a split like that. And, pretty much carries on until about 1520 or so. So another 500 years, you get that. This is the truth. Things are done a certain way for over 1,000 years. Then there's a minor split. It's like there's two paths now. Still pretty close, still in the same sort of direction. And then, at about this point, you get this. And by the time that you get to our day and age, here you go. So that's where the truth starts. And we get that for 1,050 years or so. Then another 500 years, there's two branches. And by the way, there is still the two main branches carry on. So the two main branches carry on, but then at about 1,500 you get Protestantism, and this is about 30,000 different little lines. Now you telling me that what started here and remained exactly the same for 1,000 years has been corrected and the true path is lying somewhere in one of these? Who would make that bet? Would you make that bet? It's only because we're talking about Christianity and you've been brainwashed, as I was, as everybody is, about what Christianity is and which Christianity. But this is the facts, okay? You had one path for 2,000 years. It's got one split over there, that's the Orthodox. And then it's got this split over here. And all of these freaks come out. Now, there's a little later development, which I'll zoom into it. So let's just, there. I'm just going to zoom into that little portion over there, right? That little portion over there is the continuing branch of Catholicism. And over here, you've got the, I'm just going to draw, that's Protestantism. And then you've got like Orthodoxy. So there we go. So this is the continuation, right? This is Orthodoxy, 1965, approximately there, carrying on like that. Now, there's a bit more to the Orthodoxy thing, okay, because you have Soviet Russia, there was persecution, and some of the so-called Orthodox are becoming like the so-called Catholics in China now. So they were like really political affiliations. They weren't real Orthodox. But real Orthodoxy did remain. There were some monks that, like the Irish monks, that kept their stuff, so it's a bit more of an involved history here. But generally speaking, we can say Orthodoxy carried on. Catholicism carried on until 1963-65 when Vatican II happened. And all that Vatican II did was subvert and steal, and I tried to make this a little bit thicker to show how they had perverted, in a single path, but in quite a thick one. So while this is Protestantism marching on legion, they just keep spawning new and new little branches. This branch of Vatican II basically diverted most of the Catholic Church into, and what will become merged and joined eventually, more Protestantism and just rubbish. But there is, of course, the true remnant of the Catholic Church continues. And the difference between these two are really quite minimal. They're quite esoteric differences of theology that are so rarefied that for the average person they don't matter. Now, having said that, okay, this is the real picture. That's a historical fact. No one can deny this. Okay, neither the 30,000. I'm being conservative here because these are probably like 45,000 now. But 30,000 was the last time it was measured, about 10 or 15 years ago or something like that. So now, if you look at that, and you're saying it doesn't matter which Christianity you are, that's an idiotic comment. Of course it matters, right? The truth matters. Now, is it worthwhile, to have warfare, say, between Orthodox and Catholics? No, it's not worthwhile. It's not even worthwhile to have war between your average, generally uncatechized, generic churchan, which is, they fall in here. Like the Protestants are the original churchans, and they, they've got thousands of denominations of churchanity. They're not Christians, they're just idiots, morons, people who can't be bothered to study or who have been indoctrinated. Now, some of them are Christians. I've just said they're not Christians, but some of them are Christians. Generally speaking, though, what they're taught and what they teach and what they believe is not Christianity. It's some pale shadow of it. It's some deceitful, brainwashed nonsense of it. And an objective, honest investigation into the history of the church would quickly disabuse you of any notion of wanting to be a Protestant. Very quickly. Now, there are some people that I consider Christian who don't fall into that category. For example, Vox Dei. Vox and I haven't discussed theology much. There's one of the guys on my channel here said it would be really interesting to have a talk between Vox and I about Catholicism and Protestantism. And I absolutely thought Vox was completely uninterested in that, but I mentioned it to him, and he said it's not that I'm uninterested necessarily, it's that I just don't have the time, which is fair enough. I know most of the things he's busy with, and I know there's some other things that he's busy with that I don't know the details of, So he's definitely very busy. And I absolutely understand that. I personally would enjoy that talk, purely on a personal level, because it's interesting. He's an interesting guy. He's got interesting views, and the little bits that we discussed, I can't really see much fault with his thinking and the way he comes to the conclusions that he comes to. Now, another guy who I believe is a Christian, counts as a Christian, is Owen Benjamin. And again, he's not, he was raised Catholic, says it was a horrific experience, which I absolutely believe, because I wasn't baptized and I wasn't raised Catholic, but I had a little bit of religious instruction at school, and they did a terrible job. But what you need to understand is that those Catholics were not the ones on this line. They weren't these Catholics. What you're talking about is this line. Because, I was born in 1969, Owen was born later than that. None of us have known a non-converged church. In fact, if you're born after 1958, the chances are that you've not known a non-converged church. Your particular priest might have been not converged for a time or whatever. But the fact is that modern day, most of what used to be the Catholic Church has been diverted into the sewage path, It's like diverting a clean river into the path of a sewer line. And that's what happens. And only a small trickle of pure water continues. Now, so if you've been catechized as a Catholic, in inverted commas, on this branch, yeah, you had a horrible experience. And yes, pedophile priests, yes, homosexual priests, yes, all of that perversion and twistedness undoubtedly happened. But, so what's the truth? Why does it matter? Of course it matters. Keep in mind, I'm saying two different things. This is another, I might try and label this, 3D thinking versus 2D thinking. Because Protestants are the autists of the so-called Catholic, of the Christian world. If you're going to split the denominations, Protestants are the autistic people of Christianity. They very often are incapable of thinking in 3 dimensions. They're essentially binary thinkers. They can only think in 2 dimensions, on, off, black, white. They have no appreciation of the 3rd, 4th, whatever other dimensions. And, I'm making an analogy, but the fact is, having a 3-dimensional way of thinking does not in any way make you less honest or less of a zealot at all. It does mean that what to a 2D person seems like an impossible wall, to you is just a curve. Because if you're living in 2 dimensions, then, and again, I'm just going to draw it. If you're living in 2 dimensions, you're living on this piece of paper and you bump, or you're inside that circle, that's it. The line is a wall. And if you bump into it, you can't go anywhere near it. But if you're in 3D and you bump into something, it's okay. It's just a stone. It's just a globe. You can go around it. You can go past it. It's a higher level of thinking. It's a higher level of logic. And Protestants very often are incapable of that. It's part of their upbringing. It's part of the Anglo-Saxon sort of logical, so-called way of thinking. But, great Protestant thinkers, great doctors of the church that were Protestants, they don't really exist. There's a few, I'm sure. William, what's his name? William Lane Craig. He's a guy I have quite a lot of respect for. Very good apologist, well-read man, and he knows quite a lot about the Catholic Church. That guy certainly has done quite a bit of reading. And yet, he is completely invested in the concept of salvation by faith alone. And the thing is, not understanding the Catholic approach to salvation is really, it's basically a failure of ability to think. It's an intellectual failure. If you fail to understand salvation from a Catholic point of view, and you stick to the Protestant point of view, whichever of the 30,000 denominations, it really is a lack of intellectual ability that locks you down to this Protestant idea that you're saved by faith alone. And if you follow that logically, what do they mean? Because again, when you start to try to actually get to the root of things, that's why you got 30,000 denominations with the Protestants, because they can never want to be pinned down to any one thing. And if you say, look, but do you realize that if you're saying X, then Y must follow, because that's how reality works. And then it's like, oh no, and they'll find some other, that's why you got 30,000 denominations, because think about it. If salvation is by faith alone, then the Calvinists are right, because essentially what it's saying is that if you follow through, if salvation is only by faith, whose faith? What faith? Your faith? God's faith in you? Which is it? Now, if your faith has something to do with it, then in theory, you've got free will. If you have free will and your faith can save you, similarly, even after you've said, I believe in God, you can change your mind. You can go backwards and lose your salvation. Find me a Protestant that agrees with that. They're very rare. Most Protestants live by the idiotic idea that once saved, always saved. That's absolute fucking nonsense. Again, think about it logically, all right? So let's say you say, I'm saved, I believe, I got baptized, I am now, a Christian. And then you continue, you go on to rape and murder little children and, do horrific shit. But you're still going to heaven because you're saved? No. You're going straight to fucking hell, all right? And again, this is not about fear. I never feared death. I don't now, even less now. And I never feared, I didn't become a Christian because of the fear of hell or, I don't have a fear of that stuff. And not because I don't believe in it, I do. And it's pretty obvious, when you look around. But the thing is, I don't know, I'm just built a way that doesn't concern me. I'm not a Christian because I don't want to go to hell. I'm a Christian because I want to be a Christian. And my view of hell is fuck them. If you gave me a way to fight demons or whatever, that, because they don't really fight in the physical world as much, but dude, that whole last battle, I hope I get a sword and we get to go in there that way, because I got some bones to pick. But, the thing is, if you believe this Protestant nonsense that once saved, always saved, you're a moron, okay? You are a moron. There is just no way around that. Similarly, if you believe that some stupid German that came along and then wanted to ban nuns fixed everything because God and everybody else had it wrong for over 1,500 years, again, just at a most basic level, that is such an idiotic idea that, you're a moron. Now, however, you take a guy like Vox, but he's an outlier, and Vox also doesn't agree with this once saved, always saved, because it's idiotic and he's not an idiot. But you take a guy like that and you sort of say, oh, well, but you consider him a Christian? Yes, I do, because it's quite clear everything he's doing is based on his Christianity, on his Christian faith, on his Christian belief, on his acceptance of Jesus Christ, and so on. Now, he may well be wrong about a bunch of stuff. I don't know. I'm sure I'm wrong about a bunch of stuff. But I'm sure that both Vox and I are, pulling for the same team, and we're fighting in the same direction. What about Owen? Owen was raised Catholic, but he kind of hates the fake Catholic Church, which he was raised in, because that's what he was raised in, okay? He might not know that. He probably doesn't know that. But he wasn't raised into the Catholic Church, and the Catholic churches that he attended were not Catholic churches. They had invalid clerics in there performing invalid rites. They're fake Catholic. It's the Novus Orcos. They're the New Orcs. Novus Orco Church, which is a play on words for Novus Order. Those of you that don't know, the New Order. There's no such thing. Anything with New Order just sounds a little bit suspicious, don't you think? So the New Order Mass is a lot of bullshit. It's absolute filth. If you compare the original Latin Mass, and if you understand, if you read up, educate yourself about what the original Latin Mass was about and what the New Order Mass is about, it's just a joke. It's a sick joke, which, brings us back to what Owen says, that evil has a twisted sense of humor. It kind of does. Sick, very sick. Not in a funny haha sick, but really wrong. But there is a kind of humiliation humor in it. But anyway, getting back to the original point. So this thinking in 3 dimensions, a guy like Owen, I believe, is a Christian. He is a Christian. And, he's not denominational, and he sort of says, oh shit, I don't care, and it's just stupid to argue about whether you're Catholic or whether you're like Orthodox or whether you're Protestant or whether, whatever. And I agree, yes. But keep in mind, Vox Day, Owen Benjamin, myself, we're outliers, okay? We've got IQs that are over 140, over 150, that sort of region. We have an ability to understand and see patterns that most people don't have. And as a result, you could say a guy like Vox doesn't necessarily need the Catholic Church. Or a guy like Owen doesn't necessarily need the Catholic Church. Potentially a guy like me doesn't need the Catholic Church. Because in theory, you could say, well, you're doing everything right anyway, you kind of got the right path, and you're doing the best you can, which is all that any human being can do. And yeah, that's true. However, most human beings are not that far removed from monkeys. Now, I'm not a Darwin's evolutionary theory supporter in any way, but there is something to be said for human beings being pretty close to monkeys, because most of them can't think. Most of them need rules. And if you picked 1,000 people at random, you put them on a desert island, and you left them to their own devices, it would be like Lord of the Flies pretty quick, Now, yes, it does depend which 1,000 people you took and whether they're homogeneous or not and so on. But overall, the average person needs a set of guiding rules to sort of help him. And the Catholic Church did that very well for over 1,000 years and Catholicized the world. The gospel was spread around the world because of the Catholics. So it does matter. It does make a difference. It does make a difference if you go to church in a church where you've got a female pastor. It does make a difference if you go to a church where they tell you that, homosexual marriage is just as valid as normal marriage, real marriage. No, it isn't. It's a lie. And that's what starts it, the deception. Now, Vatican II was a huge deception because it twisted all of the original Catholic thoughts. So it does matter. It makes a difference. And then when you get twisted off that path, you go off it, and you go off it, and you go off it, and more and more and more, and you end up with this cloud of tiny little denominations, which are really just a cloud of little darts whose name is Legion. So it does matter. At the same time, I've had people comment on videos and stuff. Some of it is just deleted because when you're a gamma, you just get put in the gamma mass grave. I don't even bother to respond. But some of the comments were like, oh, well, you say you're a Catholic, but then you accept that also people who are not Catholics can go to heaven and whatever. Now, again, you need to understand, the Catholic Church teaches that there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. But there's subtle points. And again, ignorance is king amongst people, apparently. Because the Catholic Church, and most people do not know this, also does not teach that you believe the Church. The Catholic Church teaches that you believe God. We believe God. We don't believe the Church, we believe God. The Church just happens to be the best way to interpret what God says and wants that we as human beings can have, but again, not due to our own work or our own intelligence or our own willpower, but because God made it so. You know, that's what Jesus said. My church will be there. I'll be with you the whole time. And if you think about how Christianity started, the very fact that Christianity even exists is miraculous. The fact that it existed for 1,000 years undisturbed is miraculous. The fact that it survived the deceptions of the Gnostics from day one and of all the other people that tried to destroy it for 2,000 years is a miracle. The fact that there is still a remnant of the Catholic Church that is true and is Catholic, and they have valid priests and valid bishops. They're few, but they're there. Despite the huge, monstrous, massive, well-planned and Protestant-led deception of Vatican II, because in Vatican II there were Protestant advisors that made some of the rules of Vatican II. See, Protestantism is the secularization of Christianity. That's what it is. And it affects it at every level, because it's like maths. You see, you can't say 2 + 2 is 4 all the time, except on Tuesdays between the hours of midnight and 1 minute. Then 2 + 2 could be 3.99999. And that's how it starts. You see, and you think, well, what difference does it make? Is for 1 minute, 2 + 2 instead of being 4 is 3.9999 periodical. Doesn't matter. You know, if somebody wants to believe that, that's fine. No. The minute you allow that, the whole of maths becomes invalid. The whole of maths becomes invalid. You can't see it right now. You know, in my little description here, you can't see it. You sort of think, oh, it's not going to make any difference. Give it time. Give it time and human nature, and down the line you'll find that somebody in that 1 minute then goes to say, well, if it's 3.9999, then pi also has to be different, because if you have a circle that has a radius of 4, but in that 1 minute it's not really 4, you know, because the radius instead of being 4 is half of 4, but in that 1 minute it's not half of 4, it's half of 3.9999. Therefore the pi also has to be different. Pi is a constant. Now you've changed pi, and so on and so forth, and it becomes a shit show. Okay? That's what Protestantism is. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, right? The only barrier to this, the only resistance to the simple fact that Protestantism is nonsense is that you have been raised with it. You've been brainwashed from birth with it. Your mother was a Protestant, your father was a Protestant. That's what you grew up in, that's the church you went to, that's what you believe. And so you believe that way. And you're twisted. You're twisted wrong, and you're wrong about many, 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 many things. And you can't untwist yourself because it hurts your identity. If you were to wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to stop being a Protestant because I've read this and this and this, and the logic doesn't make sense, you have to change who you are inside at a very deep, emotional, subconscious level. And it's very difficult to do that for human beings. Some of us don't really have a problem with it. I mean, you know, I did martial arts from when I was a little kid. Literally from, you know, when I pretty much could walk, I was training. I was training with my dad when I was 3 years old. You know, and then I stopped and started. But I did karate for most of my life, you know, and a pretty hardcore level. You know, despite my moving, despite my living in different countries, I always trained. And whenever I was in a country for a long enough time, I trained hard, and I went there, you know, regularly, you know, not just a couple of times a week. There was times in my life where I trained every day, you know, sometimes twice a day. So I did karate for years and years and years. And then I met one of these Russian guys that could do Sistema, and I couldn't lay a finger on him, and he could do whatever he wanted with me. From that moment, I dropped karate instantly and I started to train in this system because it was better. You know, it was effectively better. I couldn't do anything. You know, up until that point, most guys in any martial art, I could do something to. You know, there are some guys that are really good, better than me, whatever, but there was nobody that would just walk away without a scratch if we were going to get into a serious scrap until I met these Russian guys. And then I was like, shit, this guy can beat me up like I could beat up a little kid. So I started training with them. And then, I became better and better, and then they made me an instructor, and I started to teach it and whatever. But I dropped it in that instant. Why? Because truth matters. Truth matters. So when you start to divert from the truth, you pervert everything. You pervert yourself. You pervert your beliefs. You pervert all sorts of things. But at the same time, so this is one thought. Remember, you have to try and keep two opposing thoughts in the same brain to be a genius, apparently. So on one side, you've got this idea that you should stick to the truth as best as you can in everything that you can. You should try and do that. On the other hand, we're all broken, we're all fallen, we're all imperfect, we all fuck up, and we all see through a glass darkly, so we're all, mistaken. The point is try and minimize your mistakes. So if you know that, right, if that's the game, right? Reality is somewhere on one of these lines, okay? Somewhere in one of these lines. That's the game. Now, if you're a betting man and you knew nothing about Christianity, and I told you, listen, if you pick the wrong road on here, you end up in hell. Let's just say, I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, right? But for the purpose of this thought experiment, you pick the wrong line on here, you're going to go straight to hell. That's the rule that was started here. That's the rule that we got told here. You pick the wrong line, you go straight to hell. Now, this line has lasted 2019 years unchanged. This line also has lasted 2000 years, and there's only a little split there from these other guys, okay? These lines here, well, we split there, and then we got 30,000 different lines. You can pick one, pick whichever one you want, or you can make your own. You can make your own line here if you want. Where would your money go? What would you bet if your life absolutely depended on it? Which it does. I sure as shit wouldn't bet on one of these little lines. Would you? Really? No. I'd bet on one of these two, for sure. Because now you could argue about this. You could argue about that split and sort of say, well, but which guys kept the real one? What were they doing before? Was it really this one before? And I made my choice. I'm on that line. I'm on this line here. Some of my mates, my friends, have gone on that line, the Orthodox one. I know friends on the Orthodox line. I've got a lot of good friends on that one. And, I know some people on this one too. And I know a bunch of people on these other ones. Would I pick this big diversion, this big sewage diversion? No. I'd definitely not pick that one. Because that was a movement to change something that had been in place for 1,963 years. Why would you want to change that all of a sudden? I sure as shit ain't gonna pick these guys. That's the Novus Ordo. That's what presently inhabits the Vatican. That's what presently inhabits the so-called seat of the Pope. It's fake. They're the new orcs, right? But I also wouldn't pick any one of these guys. They just split off, and then you can create your own. You don't even have to pick one of these. You can just create your own, because you can interpret the Bible as whichever way you want. And by the way, only the Bible matters. But the guy who invented all of this changed the Bible. A little bit of a logical fallacy there, don't you think? Only the Bible matters, but you change the Bible? Interesting. So what you're really saying is only the Bible that the German guy who changed it matters. That's what you're saying. The other Bible that was fine for everybody else for 1,500 years, that one doesn't matter anymore. The Bible that this German guy who wanted to bang a nun, that guy, he got it right, yeah? But then you don't have to listen to him because you can create your own. I mean, you can be a Protestant lesbian priest that takes down the cross because it might be offensive to Muslims. That's actually happened, right? In one of the so-called Protestant churches, in inverted commas. You're going to bet your money on this? Really? that where you're going to put your money? No. No one sane would bet there. If you're in one of these little lines, if you're a Protestant of some sort, the only reason that you can be a Protestant of some sort is because you got brainwashed into it. Just like no one sane, yeah, no one mentally, compos mentis, logical, objective, and living in reality, becomes a Muslim. No one sane becomes a Muslim. You have to be born into it. And I don't know if you know this, but little kids in Islam, in Islamic countries, and even in westernized countries that go to Islamic schools, have to repeat and recite the Quran off by heart, and they get beaten if they don't do it. They get a couple of hours a day where they get beaten if they don't believe and say the right things about the Quran. That's going to brainwash anybody, you know. And despite this, there are Muslims that defect, that renounce Islam and proclaim they are now Christians, and they, you know, they're put to death for that if they're caught. There are automatic fatwas on people who do that. So it's very interesting, you know. Even with all of that outside pressure, there's still a lot of Muslims that convert, that realize that Jesus is Lord and come to Christianity. It's very interesting. But no one sane would read the Quran and understand this hadiths and decide, yeah, this is the guy I'm going to follow. You know, Muhammad, who at 54-year-olds stuck his dick into a 6-year-old, into a 9-year-old girl, Aisha. You know, that's in their own writings. You know, it's not me saying it. That's what he did. He consummated his marriage to Aisha when she was 9. That's what it says in their own holy writings. And, you know, I believe that happened. I do. And like I said, I discussed this with a Muslim guy that I worked with, and I asked him about that, and he said, well, you know, if you believe as I believe, then it doesn't matter because he's the prophet and whatever he does is okay, so that was fine. You know, it's kind of, that's called circular reasoning. It's not logic, it's just nonsense. But hey, there's over 1 billion people apparently that believe that. But do they really believe that, or were they brainwashed into it? So this is the same, you know, if you want to make a change, if you want to realize what's really going on, you have to face reality. You have to face reality. I mean, look at it from forget about looking at it from a Christian perspective. Look at it from an agnostic perspective, or even an atheist perspective. And you sort of think, well, you know, what is this Christianity thing? How did it happen? Well, shit. The main guy of it, they nailed him to a cross. And then they say he was raised from the dead. And the 11 guys that were left following him hid and were scared and that were going to be persecuted. But then after they saw him, after he rose from the dead, every one of them was willing to let themselves get martyred, get killed. Peter supposedly was crucified upside down because he said, I'm not worthy to die like my Lord, so crucify me upside down, which takes longer to kill you because, you know, crucifixion essentially suffocates you. But, you know, if you're hanging upside down, you can still breathe. And apparently it lasted a couple of days. So that's how, and this is a guy who denied that he knew Jesus Christ 3 times when they were busy nailing Jesus to the cross. So something changed in that guy, you know. And what could do that other than the truth, under the ultimate revelation of truth that you realize, oh, he is God. He is the Son of God. He is who he says he is. And so with all the other prophets, I mean, Thomas didn't believe the guy. He was like, I don't believe, you know, you guys thought that Jesus was here. He's dead, man. I saw him nailed to a cross. You know, I don't believe any of your nonsense. You're all fucking high. I want to put my fingers in his wounds and I won't believe it until I do that. And lo and behold, next time Jesus is there, he goes, hey, by the way, I'm here. There you go. Put your finger in the wound. Which point is like, oh shit. Imagine that's you, right? Imagine that's you with your mates. You follow some guru and, you know, you believe the stuff he says. He walks on water. He does miracles. You see stuff, right? You actually see with your own eyes. You experience it. You see him cure the sick and so on. But, you know, somewhere in the back of your head, you still think, yeah, he's a really great guy. He's amazing. I don't know how he does this superpower shit. You know, he's got some magic ability, but, you know, is he really God himself? Is he? And then he dies. They kill him. And, you know, you're somewhere else and all your mates like come to you like a week later and they go like, dude, He's back. He's back from the dead. He walked among us. He spoke to us just like I'm seeing you now. What are you going to think? I mean, I know I'd be that guy. You know, I relate to Thomas so much because I know I'd be that guy. I'd be like, the fuck is wrong with you? How much wine have you bastards been drinking? That's what I'd say. You know, I'd have to see it myself. And when I saw it, if I did see it, I'd realize, oh, I've been a complete fucking dick. It really is him. He is back from the dead. Fuck me. Boy, was I fucking wrong. All right. Well, whatever this guy says goes now. And you would. You know, you absolutely would. And that's why a guy like me, you know, converted, became Christian, because pretty much had a, you know, that kind of an experience. I had a very much a road to Damascus moment. I didn't look for it. I didn't believe in it. I didn't know about it. I did ask for help, because it was a very horrible time of my life, though. You know, it's I've written about it, whatever. The thing is, even when I asked in my desperation, I didn't necessarily believe it, but I didn't not believe it. You know, I asked in a way that it was real. It was real. I said, look, if there's something out there, someone out there, you know, God, Jesus, spirits, my ancestors, whatever, you know, help me out. And sure enough, I did. 2 days later, I had this experience that undeniable. I'll never be able to prove it to you, of course, but it's undeniable, and it's absolutely provable to me. So, you know, but getting back to the topic, why does it matter which denominations you are? It matters. It matters because, like I said, most people are not going to have a road to Damascus moment. Most people don't have an IQ over 150. Most people need some guidance, need some rules. And the Catholic Church, the original, real, true, still existing Catholic Church, has got all those rules written down, very simple to understand. Now, it's not necessarily light reading. You know, it's a pretty thick book. That's the canon law. It's got, I don't know, a couple of thousand pages. Let me just see. Oh no, there you go. It's not even that bad. It's, sorry, it's not 1,000 pages. It's under 800 pages, just under 800 pages. It's got thousands, it's got over 2,000 canons, you know, like items of law. But there it is. One book. You can buy it on Amazon. It's got all the canon law of the Catholic Church in there. And why is that good? It's good because it gives you the rules. And you can follow those rules, and that's it. And they don't change. You know, those rules were put together in 1917, but they've been the rules from the beginning. They haven't changed. They're all, and in there it also tells you where that rules comes from, which document, which doctor of the church, why, how it happened, what the thought progression was. Because again, you have to keep in mind that the long history of the church meant you've got a long historical progression of the theological thought of Christianity. So, for example, a guy like Thomas Aquinas asked all these questions, which was essentially a huge version of the Catechism. Now, this is a catechism I like a lot. But it's in Italian, so you know it's not useful if you don't read Italian. But it's a very brilliant book because, again, as proper catechism, it teaches also by asking questions and by taking apart, you know, little things like the credo of Christianity, and it takes it into pieces and it says, okay, well, what does this sentence mean? How does this affect this? With examples from the Gospels, parables, and so on. And it's a brilliant piece of work. Once I can't translate the beauty of the logic of good catechism, because it starts out with a little question and then it invigorates the truth of it with such power and beauty and logic, absolute reason, that it's beautiful. It's like watching, you know, I don't know, a galaxy spinning or something. It's a beautiful work of art that also has a deep, deep truth in it. And you realize that only as you go through it. And every time I've picked up this book and read any part of it, it's truly been an enjoyable process. And there's been such thoughts, in the Catholic Church, such thinking, such deep logical questioning has been there from the beginning. So the codes were put together to bring together all these rules, and then they get sort of somewhat dumbed down for the average guy who goes to mass, in the sense that, like, you're not expected to know all the rules of the canon law. I mean, there's lawyers, there's canon law lawyers that do that, and the priests are supposed to know it. The bishops certainly are supposed to know it, but even that is a specialization. Now, I read, for many years of my life, I've read contracts for a living, so I've got a pretty legalistic way of thinking, a legalistic way of reading, and it's, the canon law of the Catholic Church is a beautiful document because it's not written in legalese, and yet the logic is ironclad. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's clear. It's like reading Lysander Spooner. If you ever read Lysander Spooner's essay, Natural Law, also known as, or The Science of Justice, that's the name of his pamphlet. If you print it, it's 8 pages of A4. It's about 8 pages of A4. And in essence, what Lysander Spooner did in those 8 pages is he wrote all of the law that an honest man would ever need. All of the law and all of the politics, all of what we call politics and all of what we call law, compressed into 8 pages that make absolutely perfect sense. And any honest man, a man who's truly honest and just lives his life honestly, does not need anything beyond those 8 pages in terms of law, justice, and politics. It's an amazing piece of work. So I strongly recommend you read that. But similarly, reading the Catholic Church or the Catechism of the Catholic Church is just as interesting. It's the logic is beautiful. So again, but my point here is not about Catholics versus Protestants and all that. I think if you're a Protestant, if you start off objectively choosing to be a Protestant after you've really looked into it, you're a moron, okay? But most people are morons. That doesn't mean they necessarily need to go to hell. As far as I know, stupidity is not a reason to not be saved. And there are people who will call themselves Protestants or whatever that I believe will still end up in heaven, not because they're right, but because there is such a thing as purgatory. I believe that purgatory is self-evident in the Bible, and it's even spelled out pretty much. They don't use the word purgatory, but it pretty much states every man will be judged by his works and will be put through the fire. So it makes sense. I mean, think how flawed and fallen and broken we are. I did a little video yesterday about the illusion, right? But think, everything you see, everything you believe, everything you know is a lie. On some level, there is an element of wrongness, of lie, of twistedness in just about everything you think you know about history, about Christianity. We are literally seeing through a glass darkly, and we're living in the dominion of the enemy, who's the prince of lies. Think about that for a minute. Everything you think you know is a lie. Everything you read in a newspaper is a lie. I don't know of a single person, okay, that was involved directly in any article that ever appeared in any newspaper who agreed that what was in the newspaper was an accurate representation of what actually happened. And I know a lot of people that have been in the papers, and I've been in the papers myself. I've had people that I worked with be in the papers. I've had situations that I was directly involved in being in the papers more than once. Never, not once did they get it right. Okay? And they usually, the twist on it was some absurd thing that you're like, what? How could I even get this from that? And so you're surrounded by lies, you live in lies, you believe lies. Do you really think that the moment you drop dead, God's just gonna go, hey, cool dude, just pop up here, you're ready? No. I think you're gonna need a little bit of cleansing, a little bit of purification, as in like, oh, we got another one. You know, you gotta remember, you know, Jesus is a fisher of men, yeah, souls, and he's fishing out of a fucking sewer. That's what we are. And when he fishes you out, you're covered in crap in and out. He's like, okay, I gotta wash this fish out. You know, I pulled him out, he's saved. Now let's clean all the crap off him. And it might not necessarily be a pleasant situation. You know, there is I was having a conversation by email with Tom Kratman, who's, you know, he wrote some books for Castelia House, but then he had an argument with Vox. I don't even really know what it's about, and they kind of parted ways. And Tom is, you know, he's like that. When he gets a bee in his bonnet, he sort of like thunders off. But anyway, I was having an email conversation with him, and he came up with a quite original idea, I thought. That he said, well, who's to say that we're not living in purgatory right now? Because if you think about it, you know, living on earth is a pretty painful experience as a Christian. Maybe that's our purgatory, you know, maybe this is purgatory, who knows? And it's an interesting thought, you know, sort of like a little bit matrixy, I suppose, but, you know, why not? And given that we're all flawed, and given that God is infinitely merciful, I believe that your intent matters a lot. Of course, even your intent could be fake, right? You could have a fake intent. I mean, maybe the guy who's raping little kids thinks he's really doing a good thing. Yeah, that's not going to cut it. He's not going to heaven. He's going straight to fucking hell, and deservedly so. But I believe we have a choice, you know. I believe we do always have a choice. So, oh, pardon me. Oh. So, the truth does make a difference. Getting back to religion and, oh, what denomination? Why does it matter? It matters. It matters because if you're going to have a community that you're going to live in, and that you're going to worship with, and that you're going to rely on each other and so on, the more that community is homogeneous, the more that community believes in the same way, the more that community goes to church together, the more that community believes the same kind of things, the more they have the same sort of problems in common, that is going to be a community that survives whatever crap is going to come down the line, you know, whether it's the pole tilting, you know, the pole switching again, or the new ice age, or, you know, economic war and the hot war that goes with it, or whatever, economic collapse, war, natural disasters that all come along. And what creates that sense of community, that sense of thing? It's an amazing sensation to go to a church where they do the Latin Mass and where everybody knows what's really going on. And maybe you don't, you know, because you're the first time there, you don't understand a word of Latin, you don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but there is a deeply spiritually powerful thing there. Now, and it's not fake, it's not, I believe I told you guys, I spent years, I still do it now and then, investigating cults, you know, going into these cults and just figuring out how they're brainwashing people. And one of them was like this evangelical church where they make you stand up and sing and so on. So they engage all your senses. They do the basic hypnosis, NLP stuff. And you get brainwashed into believing, oh, you know, yeah, I'm clapping for Jesus. And and the shyster on the stage, well, it wasn't even that good, but and it was a money-making racket. It was frightening to watch, really. And I just sat there, like I went there because this girl I was seeing at the time said, "Oh, you should come to church." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't believe in all your crap." I was deeply agnostic at best, with very heavy atheistic tendencies. Which is like, "No, come along. You don't know if you don't try." And I said, "Yeah, whatever. I got no problem going there." And I went there and I watched it, and I was like, "Wow." I mean, the girl didn't speak very good English, and my Spanish wasn't great or whatever. So she was, so we weren't. But she was quite clever. She was doing she was a videographer. She was doing quite a lot of cool stuff. So she definitely had a brain on her. But at the same time, when I saw this, I honestly sat there and I thought, okay, you people don't know how this stuff works, but I do. And I understand exactly what the guy is doing. And I could even tell that the shyster on the stage, the so-called pastor or whatever it was, I could tell that he had NLP training. And NLP was invented by a complete fucking fraudster who was a cocaine addict and who most likely murdered a girl. There was only him, one other guy, and the girl who got shot in the face in one room, and neither one of them went to jail for it, So he was a fucking cokehead, a liar, and a scumbag. And he invented this NLP, and what he basically did is he took the work of Milton Erickson and compressed it into like some speedy thing, which doesn't give you the same results or the same effects, and then made it into like marketed it as the new sliced bread or whatever. It's like hypnosis for lazy people, or something. But and I could tell this guy had been trained in the basics of it, because I've been around that stuff a lot. I learned all the NLP stuff. I learned all the hypnosis stuff. I learned about the fake hypnosis guys. I learned about the bad hypnosis guys. I learned about some guys that are really good at hypnosis. I learned all the NLP techniques, so I know all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, I can spot you a mile away, dude. And whoever taught you was pretty shit. And yet it was working. He was brainwashing like hundreds, certainly, if not thousands of people into giving him money. It was just astonishing to see. And I sort of thought, well, and these people believe in Jesus. They believe in God. On some level, they believe. That's why they're there. But they're deceived. They're absolutely deceived. Now, we're all deceived on some level, right? I mean, 30 years ago, I used to think feminism was a good thing because I didn't know, what it led to. I didn't understand what it meant down the line. I didn't understand its origins. I didn't know its origins. I didn't know who introduced those things into our reality. Everybody gets fooled. So that's not the point. The point is, if you're going to start out anywhere, try and start out from as close to the truth as you possibly can. And that means don't be a Protestant, like look into it, all right? Just look into it. Just look into the history of the church. Look into, do you know that there are volumes, literal volumes of books, of documents written by the original Christians that are from before the year 200, okay? Why don't you read some of those? Why don't you just see what Mass was like? And, people that say, oh, the celibacy of the Catholic Church is nonsense and the homosexuals. Yeah, there's a really brilliant podcast by Anne Barnhart. It's number 85. Podcast number 85 by Anne Barnhart. Look it up. Listen to it. She explains why the celibacy of the priests. Now, I didn't know all the history of that. And, I've got a lot of time for Anne Barnhart. I've sent her a couple of emails where I'm like, Anne, why the fuck won't you look at this about the 1958 popes? But, and then she explained that, not to me directly, she did it in a podcast, I think, that what she calls sedevacantist, which I'm not, she says, you know, these guys just came at me like, you know, you're a dirty whore, and you know, it's kind of really weird. I've never seen that behavior from people of my persuasion of Catholicism, or real Catholics anyway. I haven't seen that. But she obviously has, and she's obviously had a reaction to that, which I understand. You know, she's a girl after all, so she's not supposed to take all that much flack, but she does. And she puts out a lot of good information regardless. You know, if you just ignore the fact that she thinks Ratzinger is the Pope, she still puts out some really good stuff. And the thing about the celibacy of the popes is of the priests is brilliant. It's really good. So I strongly suggest you listen to it, because it explains why the priests are celibate. And even though the apostles are married, and I don't want to spoil it for you, it's a good listen. It's a good. But that's why tradition matters. That's why knowing your past matters. If you don't know the stuff about the celibacy of the priest, you're just going to start assuming all sorts of other things. If you don't know that, you know, if you believe as a Protestant that, oh, they worship Mary, and it's like, no, you moron. You know, no Catholic worships Mary. You know, we pray to Mary the same way we'd pray to our friend. You know, it'll be like, hey, dude, please help me. You know, can you pray for me? Can you pray for me about this? You know, it's like asking your mate to pray for you. There's nothing wrong with that. And the same with the saints. You know, like essentially the Catholic belief is just because you're dead doesn't mean I can't talk to you. Doesn't mean that you're not watching. Doesn't mean that you're not there. Doesn't mean that you don't know what's going on. And you're my mate, or my grandfather, or you know, somebody that cared about me, and conversely that I care about, because you pray for the dead as well. You pray for the dead. You pray for them to be in a good place. You pray for them to their time in purgatory to be short and as painless as possible, so that they can go to heaven without so much trouble. So both we ask the dead to pray for us, and we pray for the dead, you know, and it's a respectful thing, and it keeps an order in your mind about the past and the present and the future that is a lot more ordered and a lot more healthy mentally than the disordered notion that you're just some disembodied guy with a finite life that, you know, ends in worm food. And don't get me wrong, I used to believe it in absolute certainty that once we're dead, we were worm food, you know. I was wrong. You know, there's no shame in being wrong. Everybody's wrong. We're all wrong plenty of times in our life. In fact, the more wrong you've been about certain things, sometimes if you're not a complete moron, you know, if you're wrong enough about certain things, you learn, you become better, and you learn stuff. So Christianity is important, you know, and which Christianity is important. And there is going to be an economic collapse at some point. It will be global, and it'll hit different regions harder than others and whatever. But, you know, why not try and build up a little community that has, I mean, paranoid as I am, and it's saved me many times. Part of the reason that I got the canon law and the Catechism of Trent and a couple of other catechisms and various different Bibles. I mean, I've got, this is just the missal, but I'll just show you a couple. I mean, I've got the so-called Catholic, one of the Catholic Bibles, the NRSV. I've got the interlinear Greek New Testament, which is, I quite like the interlinear ones, because you've got the English version, you've got the Greek. I don't know if it'll show up on the thing, but maybe you can see that. So you've got the English down there, then you've got the Greek, and word for word and the Greek, so which is not necessarily grammatically viable in English, but it gives you a much better sense of the original language. And I've got this, which is a point of contention with some of my online friends, the Aramaic Bible, you know, which they're all saying, oh, it's bullshit, there's no such thing. But the thing is, Jesus spoke Aramaic. The apostles spoke Aramaic. There are fragments of Aramaic bits of the Bible found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and other places. It makes sense to me that there probably has been or will be or would have been writings in Aramaic relating to the Bible. And if that's the case, I want to know. And I want to try and see what some of the interpretations would be like if they were written in Aramaic. What if you take, some of the Greek that maybe is not great Greek? What if you try to say that in Aramaic? How would that work out? Does it make any more sense? I don't care, either way. I mean, look, Catholicism marched on the Vulgate in Latin for over 1,000 years, and it did just fine. So, pick whichever Bible you got. But it's interesting to me to have these things because there was another one I wanted to show. Oh, there you go. This is the another one of the Catholic ones, which is I forgot the name. Remi, yeah, Doerem. That's why I forgot it, because I don't know how to pronounce it. The Doeremi version, which is sort of a pretty decent translation from the Latin of the Vulgate. I've got the Latin Vulgate somewhere. Might be in a box or in the other room, because I don't read Latin that fluently, so it's a bit hard going. But I've got a Latin one, and then something else, I've got this, which is the ceremony for the this is the original reproduction in Latin of the ritual for exorcism, and it's pretty thick little book. But the reason I've got all these books is because I'm thinking, if whatever the bomb hits and I'm out in the sticks somewhere, I want to have something that would allow us to continue civilization, even if I'm in a godforsaken hole somewhere. At least if I've got a copy of these things, they can be printed out again at some point. And I'm no monk by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something that I think we should do. We should try and look after this sort of stuff. And that tradition is important. It's tradition matters. I mean, as I'm speaking to you, I'm looking at. I'll show it at the end of the video if I remember. I've finally put up my grandparents' photographs and the family crest with a little explanation, which I had investigated and traced and done properly. But tradition matters, and tradition in the church matters. And if you're a Protestant, you don't have a tradition. And the oldest that you could say your tradition is barely, not even 500 years. And it won't be one thing, because there has not been one unbroken line from the 1521, time of Luther to the present day. Even the Lutheran churches, you go to 3 different Lutheran churches and they're doing 5 different things, But you go to an original Catholic Mass, and it doesn't matter even which country. If you go to an original Catholic Mass, it's the same. And it's been the same for over 2,000 years, So how does that happen? Well, not over 2,000 years, just under 2,000 years. But that's used to be across the globe. And what the Novus Ordo did is it destroyed that and created this new fake Mass that you all do in whatever language, and it's absolute filth. That unification of having a Latin Mass that is the same anywhere in the world, that everybody understands that's how you do the Mass, that was a unifying thing. That's what we're supposed to do. The whole world is supposed to be Catholic. That's what a Catholic means. We're all supposed to be Christians. But once you start to get these splits and you start to get these arguments and so on, like I've got good friends that are, you know, like one guy is a Baptist, and we joked with each other about it, you know, and he'll call me papist scum, and I'll call him an illiterate barefoot peasant, you know, who thinks he's following the rules of John the Baptist, which is like, again, it's so retarded, you know. How could you possibly believe that you're following what John the Baptist did? Baptists are just an offshoot of Protestantism, and so much of an offshoot that they don't even remember that they're an offshoot of Protestantism, and they made up the story that, like, no, we were from the original John the Baptist. No, you weren't. No, you really weren't. You don't even know your own history of your own crappy fake church, but never mind. The point is, you know, their intentions are good, but these little splits, these little diversions are exactly the devil's way, because now you have doubt, now you have separation. Now, and so you don't have a united Christian front, because imagine what that would be like. Imagine a united Christian front with no little hats, that all actually help each other, that all actually genuinely care about each other, that all treat each other like Christians, not some weird denomination of Christian, not that going after money, you know. If a preacher's preaching at you for money, you think again. And you got to know that the priests of the Catholic Church are poor. They're poor. I mean, those guys literally struggle, you know, with food sometimes, you know, and that's, we donate, we give them money when we can, because they're doing missions as well, you know, like we get a priest that comes from Belgium once a month to do the mass. So of course we help him to pay his ticket to, he doesn't even stay, you know, he comes over once a month on whichever cheapest flight or train he can get, and he goes straight back that same evening. It's a grueling trip, you know, and do it every month just to come and do a proper mass for proper Christians, you know. It's, when you get a priest that is covered in gold and like driving BMWs or Mercedes or whatever, you know, Bentleys or Rolls Royce, and he's got 24 of them, you know, you got a bit of a problem. And you got your so-called Protestant pastors that have got Lear jets. You know, why the fuck do you need a Lear jet for? Yeah, to go and preach? No, bitch, I'm doing this on a fucking iPhone. Yeah, and you can't do your sermon on an iPhone. Why not? Why not? You're too good? No, bullshit. You know, and that's nonsense. Especially if you're a Protestant. Hell, you don't even take the host, you know? You don't even do that stuff, so you don't believe in it. So what's the point, right? Catholic priest has a reason for being there. He hands out the host. He's the one that gives you he does the mass for the Eucharist, and gives you the little bread thing, right? He has to do that. So these things matter. And this separation, now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you put two Catholics in the room, they're not going to have 15 different opinions about all sorts of things. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately we're Catholics. And while we can disagree about this, that, and the other, ultimately we know we go to that church, we pray in that place, we get given the host in that place, we go there together, and in that place it's holy ground, you know, and our differences disappear, and it doesn't matter. And that's how it should be between Christians, but it isn't always. And when you've got these separations of, you know, Protestantism, it never is. It never is, because human beings are human. And when you go deep enough and you poke at something, it hurts, you know. It's nonsense, you know. You stick with one of the original ones, you know. I could say, I don't have, that feeling doesn't really exist between true Catholics, not the Novus Ordo guys, right? Because the Orthodox dislike the Novus Ordo guys a lot. As much, almost, no, I would never say as much as I dislike them. I patently hate those fuckers. But, you know, the Orthodox, quite rightly, you know, don't want to have much to do with the Novus Ordo fake Catholic Church, and neither do I. But real Catholics and real Orthodox, we don't have a lot to, there isn't a lot of discrepancy. I've been in Orthodox churches. I respect them. I stand there, and I know I'll listen to their stuff, even though I don't I don't understand any of their old Slavonic language and whatever, but I'll respect the rituals and all that. And I got a lot of very good Russian Orthodox Russian friends, good guys, solid people, and Christians. And we can have really cool conversations, really good conversations, about theology, about all sorts, because they're ready to rumble, but at the end of the day, we're Christians and we recognize each other as such. So that's fine. There isn't anywhere near as much distance between an Orthodox and a Catholic as there is between a Catholic and any kind of Protestant, or an Orthodox and any kind of Protestant. And now keep in mind, the very interesting thing is that Protestants invariably hate with a passion the Catholics, but they don't really say much about the Orthodox. That's very interesting, because one thing that you learn pretty quickly when you're a contrarian like I am is when you're starting to take fire, when people are starting to shoot your way, you're in the right place. You're obviously attacking the right target. When they start shooting back, then yep, that's where the enemy is. And it's amazing the amount of vitriol and viciousness that the Protestants have toward the Catholics. And the lies, the absolute historical lies they make up about Catholics is quite astonishing. I didn't know any of this because, again, not being catechized and not caring one way or the other for most of my life, when I realized that Christianity is the truth, I started to think, well, which Christianity? So I started to look, and I started to look, and I started to look, and I started to investigate and go backwards and backwards and backwards. And the more I looked, the more I got convinced that Catholicism was it. A real Catholicism. And, then I found out, that's also when I found out that, oh my God, these guys are in the Vatican, they've got nothing to do with Christianity. So that's why I never liked these fuckers, pedophile, child molesting sons of bitches. Yeah, I had an instinct about that. I just didn't know the history of it, And I was right. My instinct was right. They're fucking freaks and they should be burnt at the stake. They've got nothing to do with Christianity of any way, shape, or form. So it's interesting, but are you able to change your mind? Because I did. Karate was part of my identity, no doubt about it. I was born into it, did it all my life. But the minute something truer that works better came along, I dropped it in an instant. I didn't hesitate. Why? Because the truth matters. So challenge your beliefs. You're a Protestant, or you think whatever. There's one guy who comments on just about every video. He's a nice guy, I'm sure, but he's got these really vicious views about Protestantism being the way, and the Catholics in Ireland were working with the devil or lizards or some, whatever his thing is. And, he's wrong. But will he be able to face it and admit it? Who knows? Apparently he's a smart guy, and I think he's had a pretty rough life from the comments that he's made. And I'm sure he's a nice man. But he's mistaken about Protestantism being anything real, I mean, come on, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out, A fat German that wanted to bang a nun, who, when he did all that, the King of England, said, no, you're a heretic scumbag. And then a couple of years later, that same king wanted to murder and divorce his wife, and the Pope wouldn't let him do it. So he said, oh, well, you know what, this other guy, he's all right. He'll let me do it. You got to understand, Church of England was created so that the king could fuck a new wife after he killed the one he got bored of. And he did it more than once. He did it a few times, right? He killed a few of his wives so he could fuck someone else. And he started a whole church because he wanted to do that. So if you're Church of England, if you're an Anglican, that's your Christianity. Yep. You became that Christian so that one of your old kings could stick his dick in someone else. What the hell does that have to do with Jesus Christ? I had no idea. Don't ask me. You know, Jesus Christ got nailed to a cross for you. But if you're an Anglican, you did it so your king could wet his dick somewhere else after he killed the woman that he was with. I mean, it's fucking sick if you think about it. Just, you know, it's not that difficult to figure out. Why the hell would you ever want to be a Protestant? You know, kind of weird, man. But there you go. I expect that the flame wars on the comment section will be probably spectacular. And you probably won't see any of it because I'm just going to spam a whole bunch of it as soon as, you know, if you're going to make a logical point, go for it. You know, if you want to address anything that I've said, you need to know how to argue classically in the Greek sense. I've laid out my premises, I've laid out the axioms, and I've laid out my conclusions. If you're unable to do that, and if you're unable to stick to the conclusions based on the premises and the logical things that follow, don't bother commenting. Do not bother. You'll go straight to spam. If you can, you know, be honest and argue your point, state your premises and then argue your point. And if you think that you can shoot holes in what I said, go for it. You won't be able to, because I've done a lot of thinking on this before I decided to become a Catholic. And I've looked at my premises and I've looked at my thoughts on this well, logically, not emotionally at all. There was no emotion involved in me becoming a Catholic. It was a purely matter of logical decision based on all the facts that I gathered and the patterns that I saw and the patterns that I see and the patterns that were played out throughout history. You know, without the Catholic Church, there would be no Christianity. End of. There would be no Christendom, because the East didn't stop the Muslims. It's the West. It were the Catholics that stopped Islam from taking over Europe. It wasn't Orthodoxy that stopped it. So, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, you have to face that fact. And if that is a fact, right, if the Catholic Church, if Catholic warriors stopped Islam from destroying Christianity, what does that tell you? You know, if you believe there is a God, if you believe in the Christian God, if you believe in Jesus, the fact that the Catholics prevented the destruction of Christendom, that's a hint, right? Pretty big hint. Now you can say, oh, but it got twisted down the road and blah, 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 blah. Did it? Did it? Really? Why don't you go read the original books? Why don't you go read the original stuff that was written over 1,500 years ago? Why don't you go read some of the works that were written in the first 200 years? That's within 150 years of Jesus' ascendancy. There was documents written there that clearly show there is a very clear procession of Catholic thought that hasn't changed. And there is, I'm just reminded now of another book that I want to show you. If it's here, it might be in the other room. Yeah, it's probably in the front room. It's called The Four Witnesses. And it was written by an ex-Protestant who absolutely thought that the Catholic Church was a pile of evil scum. But he started to do some historical research. And he looked at it more and more and more, and then he became Catholic, because that's a very common path for Protestants who actually look into this matter deep enough. And, you know, when I say this, if you're having an emotional reaction to this stuff, it's got nothing to do with the truth. It's got to do with your identity. The reason you're getting an emotional reaction is because I'm tapping at your identity, and you feel as if it's an attack on your personal identity. Whether you realize that consciously or not, and usually not, when you have an emotional reaction like that, it's unconscious. it's purely because you feel attacked in who you are. Because I'm telling you, you're wrong. But you are, just like if I kept saying that 2 and 2 is 6, it's not. And just somebody telling me I'm wrong, why would I get emotional about that? If I'm convinced that 2 and 2 is 6, and there are people like that Baptist friend of mine, he's one of them. He's wrong about that and a bunch of other stuff. But he truly believes it. So he's not perturbed, when I tell him that, Baptists are just illiterate peasants that don't even know where their own fake religion comes from. He just laughs and goes, you papists have got funny hats. And that's that. And we can sit in the same trench, firing in the same direction, and we'd be fine. I'm never going to have a theological argument with that guy, because he literally believes something that is so absurd and incoherent and wrong that there's just no point. It's like, I don't know, it's like some guy that says, shoes come from outer space. What are you going to discuss with him? Take him to the Nike factory? And he goes, no, that's just the front, man. Shoes come from outer space. What are you going to argue with that guy? Doesn't mean you can't be friends with him. Doesn't mean you can't be really good friends with him and, enjoy your time as friends and do whatever. Like you could definitely be in the same trench. He just believes that stuff about, shoes coming from space. Or, it's like me and the face on Mars and the pyramids on Mars. What if I'm wrong about that? What if there's just a huge number of coincidences that point that would prove that there is no such thing as the face on Mars or whatever? At this point, given the study I've done on it, pretty much the only way to convince me is if you put me on a ship that actually goes to Mars and I can put my hand on it myself and sort of go, okay, it's just a rock. But let's say that's the case. So what? If somebody says, oh, there's no face on Mars, I'll argue with him on the points. I'll argue with him on the logic. That's why I made the challenge to Simon Dan. Because, okay, argue it. That book's been out for 24 years. No one has been able to shoot holes in it. Not a single person. Not scientists, not journalists, no one. Okay? Maybe Simon Dan can. Let's find out. I got no problem testing my theories. And if my theory is wrong, I'll update. Just like, hey, Sistema works better than Karate. Okay, update, change, So it's not a point of whether you're right or wrong. It's a point of truth. Try and find out what the real truth is. Work at it. It's important. And once you find it, then you can build a community about it. Just think about it. Catholicism used to have the same mass everywhere in the world. And then Vatican II stopped that from continuing. It had been like that for over 1,000 years. You don't think that's a sign that, there's some evil fucker trying to mess it up? Really? Just look at the clues. They're so obvious. So anyway, I could go on about this for hours. Okay, it's really interesting to me. And it's interesting to me how other people don't see it. And there is some part of me probably that is incapable of appreciating brains that only function on rhetoric. I don't know how that works. So I keep throwing out there this dialectic mixed in with rhetoric, just to piss you off a bit and throw you off balance, because why not? If you're so dumb, okay, to believe stupid shit, then I'm going to show you just how stupid that shit is. And if to do that, I have to point out some really dumb, true things, I'll do it. If that pisses you off, good. It should piss you off, so that you realize something's not quite right in Denmark, eh? German guy that wants to bang nuns, that is on record as saying some fucking horrific shit. That guy, he got it right, yeah? Just so that the English king could kill a woman that he's married. Imagine what that's like. You married some woman, you slept with her, you've had sex with her, you made love to her in theory, and then you want to fuck someone else, so you cut her head off and start your own church just so you can do it. You think that's Christian? You think that's Christianity? Really? You're an Anglican, Church of England? You're a Protestant of any sort? You did it so that a German guy could fuck a nun and an English king could kill and fuck some more of his wives. If you're a Protestant, that's why you're a Protestant. Nothing to do with Jesus being hung on a cross. Now, you might believe about Jesus on the cross, and you might believe that you're doing it for Jesus on the cross, but the reality is you bought into, or you were born into, a belief system that exists solely because of a German guy who wanted to bang nuns and an English king who wanted to kill his wife and fuck another one and then kill her and fuck another one and so on. That's why you're a Protestant. Harsh fact, but true. All right, let me know what you think. Good night.